Okay, and for more, I'm pleased to be joined live in the studio now by Organized Crime Reduction Minister Bill Blair. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for being here. I want to get you to respond to that in just a second, but I want to begin with something else. According to Toronto Police, they put out some numbers yesterday. So far this year, 285 shootings, 430 victims. That includes those that have lost their life. Both those numbers are up from this time last year. At what point at the federal level did you kind of look at this and shake your head and say, all right, we got to step in and do something here?
Yeah, about 2.5 years ago, we held a Gun and Gang Summit, and we announced at that time we were putting $347 million into initiatives that we were going to support municipal, Indigenous, and provincial police services across the country. An additional $90 million for the RCMP and CBSA to keep guns from coming across our border. But we recognize the importance of providing funding through the provinces and territories to municipal police services and to those community organizations that were working so hard to prevent crime. And so I brought about $11 million to the province of Ontario in the spring. That money has already been allocated to police services and community organizations across the province. And then because the problem continues to be a significant issue, we've been working with the province and yesterday announced an additional $54 million that will be available to municipalities, to police services, and to community organizations who want to do things that will help in their community. You know, and if I may respond a little bit to Louis' comments,
Sure.
I agree completely, by the way, that this isn't just about law enforcement. And so I would simply remind people that, you know, we also made a $1.2 billion announcement in improving the state of good repair for the housing in the city of Toronto, because that's a significant issue. We've made significant investments in communities for job opportunities and employment. I agree that, you know, we do have to make investments in kids, in communities, in creating opportunity and changing the social conditions that give rise to this violence in the first place. So the announcement we made yesterday is really about improving prevention, enforcement, and prosecution of those who are involved in this gun violence. But we've also made very significant investments and will continue to support communities that are doing important work to prevent this violence in the first place.
So 54 million committed yesterday. You mentioned the 11 million committed earlier this year, a total of 65 million committed this year. Specialized prosecutors, policing projects, intelligence gathering efforts in jails. But you mentioned this is a really difficult thing, right? I mean, this is it's sort of a nature versus nurture debate. It's a multi-pronged thing. What's the process like coming up with not just securing the money, but deciding how to allocate it? Because no matter how you allocate it, there's going to be people who aren't necessarily happy with what you've done, because there's so many different ways you can attack this complicated issue. You
know, for 10 years, I was the chief of police here in Toronto, and I can't remember a single time where there was any funding made available by the federal government to assist us in the enormous challenges we were facing in keeping the city of Toronto safe. And I remember very vividly the Summer of the Gun, for example, in 2005, and all the work we did in that period of time to reduce the incidence of gun violence. We've been working very closely with the provinces and territories, and particularly with municipal. Every town I go to, I go see the mayor. I speak to Mayor Tory on a very frequent basis, and in every conversation, it's what do you need and how can we help you? And I believe very strongly that all three orders of government have a responsibility to work together and to make sure that those who are working on the front lines in policing, but also in communities, have the resources and the tools that they need to keep our communities safe. And it's an all governments effort. I think that's the right approach for this. We know everybody thinks there's a simple solution. There isn't. You got to do 1,000 things, and you got to do them all well. And so we're committed to supporting the people that are working on our front lines in policing, because I believe cops count, but also in communities, because youth workers count, teachers count, parents count, and kids count, and we're going to support them all.
You know, it's an issue that's big enough that I think, regardless of political stripe, all three levels of government agree that you sort of have to put the politics aside and get something done here. When a big decision like this is made to put this money forward and to find this money, and this is a real tough question I'm about to ask you, but how long before you think you actually start to see tangible changes in curbing some of this gun violence? I know when you're investing in social programs and community, that's real grassroots. Things like that might take some time, but when do you expect to see the fruits of an investment like this?
You know, 2 weeks ago, and as a result of violence that was occurring in Toronto and the escalating fear, people's sense of loss of security in Toronto, I reached out to the mayor and to the police chief, and I said, how can we help? And we, together, came up with resources, a total of $4.5 million to immediately assist the City of Toronto and the Toronto Police Service to put more boots on the ground, to get more officers out into communities, to begin to do the things immediately that will make a difference. And you know, the police chief's been working on that and has announced a number of the measures that they're coming forward with. We're supporting that because it's absolutely critical. You know, these are issues today. Every mother who's lost a child, every community that has experienced violence they need and deserve our support, and we're going to be there for them. And you know, we've been acting quickly, but we're also making long-term investments that are going to make the difference. You know, we have no choice. We have to turn the tide of this violence in our community, and quite frankly, our government is prepared to do anything and every measure that will be effective in keeping guns out of our community and keeping our citizens safe.
Really appreciate you taking the time to stop by and join us this morning. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.
That is Federal Organized Crime Reduction Minister Bill Blair.